To Earth today after an exhaustive historic mission. The 8 space travelers finished their medical tests yesterday. The 3 who have been in space 4 months were prepared for a return to gravity. Still, they probably will be carried off the shuttle in stretchers until they get their strength back. CNN will cover the shuttle landing live this morning. Atlantis is scheduled to touch down at Cape Canaveral during the 10 Eastern hour.
US space shuttle Atlantis returns home, ending 10 days in orbit, and a historic joint mission with the Russian space station Mir. The 2 spacecraft spent 5 days joined together as they helped to pave the way for the eventual construction of an international space station in 1997. Returning on Atlantis will be the astronaut and 2 cosmonauts who lived together on Mir. Atlantis is scheduled to touch down at 14:56 GMT. That's about 3 hours.
Returns to Earth today after an exhaustive and exhausting and historic mission. The 8 space travelers finished their medical tests yesterday. The 3 men who've been in space 4 months were prepared for a return to gravity. Still, they probably will be carried off the shuttle on stretchers until they get their Earth legs back. CNN will bring you live coverage of the shuttle landing this morning, scheduled to touch down at Cape Canaveral during the 10 a.m. Eastern Time hour, actually nearly 11 o'clock a.m.
Space shuttle prepares for its return to Earth, while its 3 new passengers brace for the sudden impact of their own weight. Come to an end. After 10 days in orbit, the US space shuttle Atlantis is on its way home, carrying American astronauts and Russian cosmonauts. It spent days joined to the Russian space station Mir, making the first US-Russian space hookup in 20 years. Well, Atlantis is due to touch down at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida in about 45 minutes, and CNN International will broadcast it live. Atlantis' mission is being called a success, but communication is a problem which may be magnified in future endeavors. CNN's Miles O'Brien has more details.
In space, there is little margin for error.
Houston, Atlantis, we have capture.
But these days, there is plenty of opportunity for things to get lost in the translation. Ask cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev, who has flown on the U.S. space shuttle and logged 15 months aboard Russia's Mir space station.
Sometimes I saw that it's just kind of misunderstanding. One people trying to help other people, but it's not very helpful because they misunderstood each other. So we try to improve this mutual understanding.
Krikalev is one of the more visible players on the team trying to overcome the cultural, technical, geographic, and of course, linguistic differences between the U.S. and Russian space programs. A few consoles away in NASA's Mission Control Center, you'll find the RIO, or Russian Interface Officer. Sitting beside a translator, the RIO is on an open line to the Russian Control Center in the Moscow suburb of Kaliningrad. This is the primary link between flight directors at the 2 centers.
It's like carrying on 2 telephone conversations at once.
But help is never far away. In a back room adjacent to the flight control room, Russian consultants are plugged in and listening. A similar U.S. team is posted in Russia. In all, there are a dozen open lines linking controllers and consultants in Houston and Kaliningrad. It's basically the same communication setup devised for the Apollo-Soyuz docking 20 years ago. Eventually, both space agencies would like to link their computer systems so they can share data more easily. But for now, they are relying heavily on fax machines. The system may sound ad hoc and cumbersome in this age of instant digital information. But NASA Flight Director Bob Castle says neither control center is flying in the dark.
We know infinitely more about the Mir station today than we did 2 years ago. And the Russians know infinitely more about the shuttle today than they did 2 years ago. We've learned a lot about each other's vehicles and how each other does business already.
All of this is bound to get easier as this partnership matures. And if it leads, as NASA hopes, to construction of an international space station, controllers in Houston will find things may get even simpler. The official common language on the space station is English. Miles O'Brien, CNN at the Johnson Space Center, Houston.
Launch Europe's first military spy satellite later in the day. The Ariane rocket is scheduled for liftoff from Kourou Space Center in French Guiana. France, Spain and Italy financed the Helios 1A satellite. Officials say it will provide Europe with vital military intelligence from space to monitor world and regional crises. It's the first of a series of scheduled Helios missions. Well, still to come on World News, China. The US space shuttle Atlantis is on its way home. It spent days joined to the Russian space station Mir, making the first U.S.-Russian space hookup in 20 years. Atlantis is due to touch down at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida in about a half hour. CNN International plans live coverage of the landing.
The following is CNN's coverage of a live event.
I'm John Holloman at the CNN Center in Atlanta. CNN's live coverage of the Space Shuttle Atlantis landing continues now. The shuttle will be landing from south to north at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The clouds have been building around the landing strip for the past 2 hours, but NASA weather forecasters gave the crew the go-ahead to start the trip down an hour ago. Now, the picture that you're seeing live on CNN at this moment is a picture of the shuttle taken with an infrared camera. You can probably look in the middle of your screen and see the outline of the shuttle. You can see the white shuttle tail sticking up in the background as Atlantis continues to make its way down. The front of the shuttle is pointing toward the downward part of the screen right now as Atlantis makes one of its final turns toward the runway. About 30 minutes ago, Atlantis began to feel the tug of gravity, and for the 3 long-term space travelers aboard, it's the first time they could feel their weight in nearly 4 months. For most of the astronauts on board, this has been a very productive trip. Commander Hoot Gibson and pilot Charlie Precourt got the spaceship docked with Russia's Mir space station on schedule and on time last week, and the undocking on the 4th of July went almost letter-perfect as well. There's an interesting shot of the shuttle. You can see
infrared long-range tracking camera at the Kennedy Space Center, clearly showing the shuttle Atlantis at the correct angle of attack. Time to touchdown, 2 minutes.
So we have 2 minutes till we'll see Atlantis on the ground. This is, there have been more than 40 landings at the Kennedy Space Center landing strip, and the weather there is cloudy, as you can see a minute ago, but acceptable for an on-time landing. After landing, there will be a long series of events. As soon as the shuttle wheels stop, Norm Thagard will attempt to stand up. His 2 Russian cosmonaut colleagues will decide if they, too, want to try to stand. Their crewmates will be close by to make sure they're okay as they attempt this. They'll be taken out of the shuttle on stretchers and moved to the Operations and Checkout building in Florida for 6 hours of another intensive medical exam. Their families will be there too. The medical testing will continue for the next several weeks at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, where the 3 will continue rehabilitation work to get back in good physical shape. About 25 minutes from now, the hatch will open on the side of Atlantis, and 20 minutes after that, the astronauts will come out. We don't know if the astronauts who've only been in space for 10 days will walk around and kick the shuttle tires or not, but we'll be looking to see. The Atlantis shuttle orbiter will be off the landing strip by nightfall, towed to NASA's orbiter processing hangar and checked from top to bottom and put back in shape for its next mission,
down the pike,
which will be another trip to the Mir space station. We'll listen in to NASA commentator Rob Navius as the shuttle goes down into its final through the clouds landing at the Kennedy Space Center. The voice you'll be hearing that of Rob Navius, a NASA commentator. Looks like
Gibson now flaring up the nose, landing gear deployed by pilot Charlie Precourt. Atlantis just a few hundred feet off the deck.
There's going to be an excited seagull there to the left of your screen in about a minute as the shuttle comes by. Shuttle over the landing strip.
Main gear touchdown. The drag chute being deployed by pilot Charlie Precourt, and nose gear touchdown. Atlantis rolling out on runway 15 at the Kennedy Space Center to complete a 4.1 million mile mission and the first docking with the Russian space station Mir.
Shuttle looks good. As I said, by the end of business today, the shuttle will be taken off the landing strip there, towed into the rehab building at the Kennedy Space Center, and made ready for its next flight, which will be late in the year, a return engagement to the Russian Mir space station, where there'll be the main cargo in the cargo bay will be a new docking adapter, which will allow the shuttle in the future to use this docking extension tunnel attached to Mir.
Houston,
this will
Atlantis, Kurt, we've got wheel stop. Atlantis, Houston, we copy wheel stop, and welcome home, Atlantis. Welcome home, Mir 18. Congratulations on your perfect end to your historic mission. A new era in human spaceflight has begun.
Sounds like that statement might have been prepared in advance.
Dr. Kurt, we couldn't have said it better. We're proud to have been part of it.
Shuttle Commander Hoot Gibson with the capsule communicator.
Atlantis, Houston, stand by for your post-landing deltas. Okay, Kurt, standing by.
Post-landing deltas, or any problems that might have occurred in the various checklists that the astronauts and ground controllers and people on the ground there in Florida might be seeing. In NASA speak, a delta is something that is a potential problem.
Atlantis, Houston, we have no deltas to your post-landing. Your go to pick up on page 5-3.
No problem.
Okay, 5-3.
As the astronauts and their controllers continue then to go through their post-landing checklist, I'll tell you about the next shuttle launch. It is going to be 6 days from now, the shortest turnaround time for shuttle missions ever attempted. The spaceship on Pad B at Launch Complex 39 is Discovery. It's loaded with a communication satellite. The plan is to launch it Thursday, July 13th, 9:41 in the morning, and CNN will have live coverage for you. One more thing before we go. CNN's coverage of the space shuttle program will continue as the astronauts come out. If we get to see them on the ground, we'll try to bring that to you as it happens, and we'll continue to watch to get a medical update on those 3 astronauts, or 1 astronaut and 2 cosmonauts, who are experiencing gravity right now for the first time in 4 months.
Later at 9:54 and 44 seconds Central Time.
That concludes our live coverage of the mission of Space Shuttle Atlantis. I'm John Holloman at CNN Center.
Back safely, another successful mission, but the U.S. space program is facing a severely curtailed fiscal future. Has launched 100 manned space flights, with today's Atlantis landing the 99th successful return. Even the high rate of success cannot protect NASA from the long knives of fiscal and political reality. Roughly 100,000 people are working on space agency programs in the United States, but budget proposals now in the Congress could cut the total by as much as 40%. This might have a sharp effect on future planning, especially the joint effort to orbit a space station by the year 2002. We're now joined by Dr. John Logsdon of George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs. He is also a director of the school's Space Policy Institute and the Center for International Science and Technology Policy. Technology policy it is, isn't it, Doctor?
Too many titles.
All right, but that's a long title for a long history of space which you have followed.
Indeed.
Where now goeth the United States and, in fact, the world?
Well, I think with this mission, we're started down a very different path. The first 99 U.S. space flights were basically competitive with the Soviet Union. There was a space race, and the momentum of that carried us very far. But it's over. The world has changed. This mission symbolizes the way, not symbolizes, actualizes the way we're going to do space in the future. It's a joint venture, first of all, of the only 2 countries that can put people in space, the U.S. and Russia, and eventually involving most of the other major countries in the world.
But without that competitive edge, without the fiscal fears that fueled the space program, isn't it more likely that people will become sort of lackadaisical, more earthbound, earth-oriented?
Well, I hope not. I mean, this is no longer romantic entertainment. These are people going to work in space to do useful things, moving out first into permanent occupancy of low Earth orbit, and I think sometime first 10 or 20 years of the next century, beginning to venture once again back to the moon.
Let's talk about the money, though. NASA's budget is being curtailed considerably. There are maybe 35,000 actual NASA employees. What happens to the grand plans for the space station now?
Well, I think the station is relatively secure politically compared to the rest of the program. I mean, it would be ironic in the face of this kind of success. And I think today the Galileo mission approaching Jupiter launches its independent probe into the atmosphere of Jupiter. That we're doing all these very positive things at the same time as the Congress wants to essentially cut our future possibilities.
The next half-dozen dockings and joint efforts, MIR and the various shuttles, are going to look quite a bit like this one, aren't they?
Well, sure, because this is practicing for the time when we have a fully equipped, highly capable laboratory in space. That is the International Space Station. So this is doing run-up experimental work, learning the impact of working in microgravity for long duration. So it should look the same. This is, as I said earlier, not entertainment. This is real work. It's real research.
But Doctor, you'll forgive me, it is entertainment in some ways in terms of the American public's attention span. And what I'm getting at is it likely all of the networks, I believe, carried the docking the other day as sort of a signal event. But it's not likely, is it, that this will continue on as a television spectacular?
No, I don't think it will, nor need it to make it valuable to the country. I think the substance of what's being done is important.
All right, and we see a lot, as we're seeing now, of people having kind of fun in space, a whole lot of people inside the Mir. Those scenes are not too likely to be repeated. What I'm getting at is how does NASA and how does the Russian space effort continue to sell the program?
Well, I think we have to make, as a country, the United States, and really as a world, a decision of whether we want to be in space with humans or not. I mean, there's a fundamental decision, yes or no. We're going to do it together or we're not going to do it at all. And I think the decision ought to be yes. And then we go step by step in establishing the capabilities and getting the experience.
Is NASA likely to be getting the money? It's been pared down considerably. In your view, is this sufficient?
Well, I think that the budget cuts that have hit NASA in the past 3 years have been appropriate, and they have kind of sized the agency's budget to its current national priority. But the proposals in the Republican budget resolution, I think, cut too much. They begin to cut meat rather than fat in the program. I don't think they're in the country's interest.
Does it need to be said something about a goal? Do you need a JFK statement of aims here in order to rekindle America's and Congressional's interest in space?
No, I don't think so. I think space is now a place where we're doing a variety of interesting and useful things. There's not one space program. There are lots of activities done for different purposes. One overarching goal, I don't think, except maybe for the scientific part of the program, makes sense.
All right. As we lift off there in the big picture, our thanks to John Logsdon. He's director of the Space Policy Institute at George Washington University, author of a book, by the way, too, The Decision to Go to the Moon, Project Apollo, and the National Interest. And we'll be back with a look at some of the other events of this day when World News from Washington returns.
Hello and welcome. The U.S. Space Shuttle's back on Earth after a groundbreaking mission. For the first time in 20 years, U.S. and Russian spacecraft linked up in orbit. CNN's John Holloman's here to tell us more about the historic flight, which ended a little more than an hour ago.
Chris, it was sort of, as you said at the beginning, picture-perfect landing. There were a lot of beautiful pictures on this mission, and apparently a good bit accomplished for not only regular things here on Earth, but diplomatic missions between countries. The shuttle Atlantis landing was as pretty a picture as the rest of this mission, it seemed to me. It came down on the runway just a few miles from the launch pad, on schedule, through a blue sky filled with some puffy clouds. As soon as the shuttle came to rest, Commander Hoot Gibson gave the news to Mission Control in Houston.
Houston, Atlantis. Kurt, we've got wheel stop. Atlantis, Houston, we copy wheel stop, and welcome home, Atlantis. Welcome home, MIR 18. Congratulations on your perfect end to your historic mission. A new era in human spaceflight has begun.
In the hours since landing, the 3 people who've been in space for 4 months have tried to stand up and move around a little. And they're in the process of unloading from Atlantis. And the live picture that you see now, they'll go into that people mover vehicle and will be taken, perhaps with some of the other crew members, to a hangar where the 3 people who've been there the longest will be given a quick medical exam. In fact, it'll be a 6-hour medical exam. They'll also get to spend some time with their families today before flying back to Houston for a multi-week series of medical work. Before they left, they got a phone call from the President of the United States.
We built a new relationship between our two countries. We're doing things together, and I think that what you and your team and what the Russians did together symbolizes that more than anything that I could ever say. And I think because of your mission, now the United States and Russia, with our partners in Canada and Japan and Europe, are going to be able to meet the challenge of building the International Space Station. And I hope you and all of your team members will take an enormous amount of pride in that.
Now, we've just seen in our live picture coming down from the Kennedy Space Center the retractable door on the people mover pulled back from the space shuttle. That means some or all of the astronauts are on board that vehicle, at least the 3 people who've been in space for the longest period of time. We probably won't see them again for a while. But in the phone call with President Clinton, Norm Thagard sounded tired and a little out of breath, and he told Mr. Clinton he was happy to be contributing to cooperation with the Russians in space. This mission lasted 10 days, and it took years to plan, and it's been a major step, we are told, in putting diplomats into orbit.
12.
It took several days of bad weather to get a day clear enough to launch Atlantis on its 10-day odyssey. But its mission was to make history, and that's just what it did.
2, 1, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission that will herald a new day of international cooperation in space.
It didn't take long for the shuttle to catch up to Russia's Mir space station. The docking of the 2 ships was a ballet played out 200 miles in space at 17,000 miles an hour.
Houston, Atlantis, we have capture. Copy, capture.
After the handshake between the Russian and U.S. commanders, the 2 crews got together inside Mir. It was the first time 10 people have ever flown together in space.
That it was perhaps the proudest moment of my life to be able to take part in an event such as this.
The star of this mission has to be Norm Thagard, medical doctor, expert on long-duration spaceflight, and now the American with more hours in orbit than anyone else. He told CNN he never expected to be in space this long, and it's caused him some problems.
I miss my family a lot. I've depended on them for support, and I've gotten it through the years. It's tough to be away from home. I spent a year in Vietnam. I guess I spent nearly 4 months here. It's something that you feel you have to do.
Although the shuttle astronauts didn't feel the docking with Mir, Thagard and his cosmonaut colleagues aboard the space station certainly did.
When the shuttle docked, we felt it. The 100 tons hitting the station had some impact on us, and it was pretty impressive given the mild sensations with the previous vehicles.
After 5 days together, the shuttle and Mir pulled apart. Not as dangerous as the docking, but remarkable in that the cosmonauts who took over the space station from Thagard and his partners left Mir to take this picture, a grainy but amazing shot of 2 100-ton spaceships slowly kissing goodbye.
Concur, separation.
Back inside the shuttle, it was workout time for Thagard and his 2 cosmonaut companions. The treadmill was a daily ritual, along with rehabilitation inside a bag designed to fool the body into thinking there's gravity where there isn't. The 3 long-duration space travelers will spend the next 3 weeks trying to get back to normal after the rude awakening at the landing strip, that their bodies really do weigh something. You know, I can't imagine what those 3 people must be feeling right now, having weighed nothing, literally, for 4 months, and now they're beginning to feel kind of tight.
That's what I was going to ask, John. Light landing, but heavy bodies now, eh?
Yeah, exactly. It's Norm Thagard is the guy with the most United States expertise in this. Of course, the Russians have a great deal of experience in it. One of the things that they did in an effort to make this landing a little easier for the 3 guys was to put them on reclining couches rather than chair seats like they have for the other astronauts. It'll be interesting to see if that particular countermeasure was effective.
Well, John, we can see the pictures of the shuttle. It all looks so smooth. What's next?
Well, there's going to be another shuttle launch about 5 miles from the spot where this picture is taken. There is another shuttle launch pad. There are 2 of them in Florida. There is a shuttle there, poised, ready to go 6 days from now. It'll leave town July the 13th at 13:31 GMT. That's the current schedule, and CNN International will be here to bring it to you live. It looks like there's some dignitaries, by the way, waiting perhaps for the astronaut crew members to come out. I don't know if we have time to show that to our viewers, but
standing next to the transport vehicle is we expect to see some members of the
flight crew. We can stay for a while? Okay. Okay, good.
Disembark from that transport vehicle momentarily and take their traditional walk around the vehicle.
Okay, I talked to NASA Administrator Daniel Golden a couple of hours ago, and he was very interested in being there to be involved in this picture and to talk to the astronauts. Here they come.
They're coming out.
And we do see Commander Hoot Gibson climbing down the stairs as he's followed by, looks like his pilot, Charles Precourt, as well as mission specialists. Ellen Baker, Greg Harbaugh, and Bonnie Dunbar.
Okay, the man on the left of your screen with the gray hair is not the head of NASA, but the head of the Russian Space Agency, Yuri Kopchev. And he's got a couple people up those stairs, too, that he'd probably like to hug. They haven't come down yet. Well, I guess they won't come down. They're probably already on the way to go back to the hospital. But he's there to symbolize the U.S.-Russian cooperation on this.
Well, John, thanks for joining us and seeing this seeing the landing through. It was great to get the live pictures. We'll keep in touch with you. And
see you next week.
We'll do.
All right.
John Holliman, thanks very much. CNN's John Holliman updating us.
Main gear touchdown.
A picture-perfect ending to a historic space mission. The U.S. space shuttle Atlantis landed at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida a short while ago. It spent days docked with the Russian space station Mir, making the first U.S.-Russian space hookup in 20 years. Among the crew riding back to Earth on Atlantis were a U.S. astronaut and 2 Russian cosmonauts who spent 4 months in space. U.S. President Bill Clinton says the mission has opened a new era of cooperation in space. But as CNN's Miles O'Brien reports, communication is a problem which may be magnified in future endeavors.
In space, there is little margin for error.
Houston, Atlantis, we have capture.
But these days, there is plenty of opportunity for things to get lost in the translation. Ask cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev, who has flown on the U.S. space shuttle and logged 15 months aboard Russia's Mir space station.
Sometime I saw that it's just kind of misunderstanding. One people trying to help other people, but it's not very helpful because they misunderstood each other. So we try to improve this mutual understanding.
Krikalev is one of the more visible players on the team trying to overcome the cultural, technical, geographic, and, of course, linguistic differences between the U.S. and Russian space programs. A few consoles away in NASA's Mission Control Center, you'll find the RIO, or Russian Interface Officer. Sitting beside a translator, the RIO is on an open line to the Russian Control Center in the Moscow suburb of Kaliningrad. This is the primary link between flight directors at the 2 centers.
It's like carrying on 2 telephone conversations at once.
But help is never far away. In a back room adjacent to the flight control room, Russian consultants are plugged in and listening. A similar U.S. team is posted in Russia. In all, there are a dozen open lines linking controllers and consultants in Houston and Kaliningrad. It's basically the same communication setup devised for the Apollo-Soyuz docking 20 years ago. Eventually, both space agencies would like to link their computer systems so they can share data more easily. But for now, they are relying heavily on fax machines. The system may sound ad hoc and cumbersome in this age of instant digital information. But NASA Flight Director Bob Castle says neither control center is flying in the dark.
We know infinitely more about the Mir station today than we did 2 years ago. And the Russians know infinitely more about the shuttle today than they did 2 years ago. We've learned a lot about each other's vehicles and how each other does business already.
All of this is bound to get easier as this partnership matures. And if it leads, as NASA hopes, to construction of an international space station, controllers in Houston will find things may get even simpler. The official common language on the space station is English. Miles O'Brien, CNN at the Johnson Space Center, Houston.
Plus, a liftoff that represents Europe's break from the past. Stay with us. France's first spy satellite is now orbiting the Earth. The satellite was sent into space aboard a European Ariane rocket launched from French Guyana on Friday. It was deployed from the rocket about 18 minutes after the launch. The satellite will give Europe its own means of monitoring flashpoints and gathering military intelligence independent of U.S. information gathering. The project is funded by France, Italy and Spain. While the French were launching a mission, the United States was ending one. The U.S. space shuttle Atlantis returned to Florida's Kennedy Space Center on Friday. Its mission saw the first U.S.-Russian space link-up in 2 decades. The shuttle returned with a U.S. astronaut and 2 cosmonauts from the Russian Mir space station. The 3 men will have to readjust to gravity after spending more than 100 days weightless. The next U.S. shuttle mission is scheduled to launch just 6 days from now. space shuttle with the Russian Mir space station is something of a dress rehearsal for future plans. NASA is working with several other countries on plans for a space station, but it is hard to arrange international cooperation without some form of mutual communication.